According to a couple of letters to the Subiaco Post recently, there's some people that are unhappy with the traffic calming along a street in Wembley. Now, I'm going to do a ride through of this street end to end in a minute and show you what it looks like, but let's just pick out the main points here. So distracted drivers hit the curbs. Cyclists struggle when it is dark to see them early enough, and drivers definitely try to get through before bike riders. Okay, I can see, they're all problems we can have a look at and see if that's true. And there's also the questions asked, well, why do we need bike lanes or quiet streets at all? And I think these next two articles answer that quite clearly. The first one, there's a bloke now going to jail because he was driving at 132 kilometres an hour in a suburban street, hit a kid and killed him. So I think that clearly shows that if you engineer streets that allow people to drive at 132 kilometres an hour, before long, some idiot will drive that fast, and if they hit someone, then they're very dead. The second one is this week a motorcyclist was actually killed in Cottesloe when it appears they're going too fast, left the road and hit a tree. So I think that very clearly shows that if you put in some engineering that calms the streets, it'll stop people from killing themselves and killing other people. I'm going to start the review at the western end of this street. It's not quite where this ends, but I just happened to be on this path and thought I would start the review here. And it just shows that the work they're doing here actually hooks into an existing network of routes for cyclists. Now, getting across the road at the moment wasn't the easiest. This is a pretty busy street. But the first thing you'll notice as we go along here is there's already quite a few pre-existing speed humps along here. You'll see old and new ones as we go. And you'll also see that fake brick paving in the middle of the road that they've laid down. That's fresh. And the side streets, I didn't ride up and down any side streets, but when I looked up and down them, I saw there were a lot more speed cushions like this one here. And I think the council and the council engineers have essentially carpet bombed this area with speed humps. They really want drivers to not be thrashing their cars up and down these streets like they do in Canada Bay, for instance. We used to live in both Warringah Street and Cranto Street. Cranto Street was the worst. Big, wide, straight open street. And every day would have people flogging it up and down there at over 100 kilometres an hour. Anyway, there's the first island over on the right. And I'm just gobsmacked that someone writes a letter to the paper saying that drivers are running into curbs like that. These are not massive islands that stick out a huge distance. They are maybe a metre wide. If someone is driving into those, they're seriously either not paying attention, too elderly and decrepit to be driving, or just incompetent, drunk, looking at their phone, distracted, whatever. You've just got no excuse for hitting something like that. And cyclists, if you can't see them at night, you need to get brighter lights. Sorry, and e-scooters as well. You need to have a light, you need to have something that's bright enough to see that. And we can see as we go along here, there's lots and lots of street dug up with obviously more concreting work to be done. So anyway, going back to the likes of Cranto Street, big, wide, long, straight street, big speeding problems. So you remember the story I told, I had in here about the idiot doing 132 kilometres an hour and killing a kid? That would have been quite easy to do here as well. So this kind of traffic calming isn't just a benefit for cyclists to slow down the drivers. How many times have people in Five Dock, for instance, complained they've had their wing mirrors knocked off or their car doors damaged when they're parked on the side of the road, and some speeding idiot has crashed into their car and then taken off and left them with thousands of dollars in damage because they're speeding and lose control. This is the kind of thing that's supposed to stop that. Okay, we just went over a big speed cushion at an intersection. There are a couple along here, but they seem to be fairly rare. I would have thought it'd be good to have more of those treatments along here, and certainly other quiet streets I've reviewed, every intersection has one of them. I don't know if they're going to do that. I'll have to go and dig the plans up. This was just a ride through on a whim. So I haven't done any planning. I haven't done any review in advance. I just thought, I'm in the area, I'll go and ride up and down the street. So there's actually no real chicanes here. A chicane to me is where you've got concrete blisters on both sides of the road, and it really forces you into a narrow canyon, essentially, of concrete. I'm not seeing that along here. I'm just seeing a blister on the left and then a bit further up a blister on the right and speed humps in between. So How effective this is going to be at actually slowing down people that want to scream down here at high speed, I don't know. But you can see so far, it's a nice wide road, and it's pretty pleasant to ride along. I don't know how much traffic this gets. Maybe with all those speed humps, not a huge amount. It does cross over a couple of quite busy roads, and this was one of them. And I thought, God, how am I going to get across here? It's a Sunday, and there's still quite a bit of traffic. So I just edged over to this refuge, which wasn't very wide. I didn't need to in the end because the traffic dried up. But I imagine that's what you'd need to do on a weekday to get across. Now, from here on, the terrain slopes up quite a bit. So I'm slogging it uphill here in a lower gear. It's really hard to tell, with the cameras what the incline is like. But trust me, this is not a fast uphill here. And you can see again the intersection's got this huge, big red raised pad right across it in all directions, which is good for slowing drivers down. Now, I don't know if they're going to make this a 30-kilometre-hour street, but I just thought it was interesting that they've got these signs saying slow down to 40 when the end game might be to slow it down to 30. Again, we've now got this fake brick stuff in the middle of the road. That is not very tall. It's maybe sticks up a centimetre. You can certainly drive over it. You can ride over it. I don't know if I'd want to do it on slick tyres on a road bike. It might be a bit slippery in the wet, but certainly on a mountain bike it's fine. And you can feel how rough it is as you ride over it, which again gives you that tactile sensation to drivers to slow the heck down and not speed. Now, we've certainly got some visual narrowing here, but this is the bit that I really didn't like, and I call it the concrete canyon. And they've built this massive wide concrete island in the middle of the road to create this narrow lane here. But the problem for cyclists is we're now going uphill. And I was, lucky to hit 20, 25 kilometres an hour going up this hill in this concrete canyon. What if a car comes up behind me and they're wanting to push it? I can't go to the left. There's no footpath or anything. There's a steep curb. They can't go to the right around me because there's concrete curbs. And we know there's going to be some drivers who will just absolutely blow a fuse when that kind of thing happens. And there'll be someone even slower than me slogging up the hill, and they'll be on the horn and they'll be revving their engine and they'll be so aggressive it's not funny. And, at worst case, they lose control and they just run into the back of that person because they're so, we've all come across mental cases like that, I think. If you've been riding it long enough, you've probably come across someone that's just loses it totally in a rage when they're in the car. And you don't want to engineer the conditions to create that kind of mental meltdown. I would have thought a better move along there would be, and again, look, they've also got pinch points in here with no bypasses for cyclists. And you can see, I guess, they're building more concrete islands in the middle. So I would have thought the best thing to do would be narrow that island in the middle to enable a unidirectional uphill lane for the cyclists. So you're completely separated, nice little strip of concrete, and the drivers have got their own lane, which would be narrow to slow them down. And on the downhill, you can just roll down in the lane. We don't need a special bike lane to roll down the hill because you can be rolling down at the speed limit if they set it to 30 kilometres an hour. So, look, maybe they're going to do some more engineering to make it better or more comfortable, I guess, for riding up that hill. I don't know. I'll have to come back and I'll either have to go online and look at the plans, which I'm pretty hopeless at doing, or just come back when they've finished it and do another review. But look, I think I might ride through this during the week and see what's happening with the roadworks and maybe even see if I can find a project manager to have a chat with. Now, from here on in, we're into the quiet suburban section, and it finishes at a T-junction up ahead. If I headed down any street to my left, I'd end up at Lake Munga, which is a really nice ride to go around there. And if I headed to the right, I've reviewed some cafes that are kind of off on the right-hand side, and I'd eventually hit the railway line going into Perth, into the CBD. So look, I think this is an interesting route that goes across here. And certainly there's some connectivity at the other end. Look, there's a speed cushion up the road there, just to show it's on the side streets. Yeah, it's an interesting bit of connectivity across the suburb. How well used it's going to be by cyclists, I don't know. I guess I could look at a Strava heat map to see how many people are using it at the moment, but I can't be bothered. All I wanted to do was just show you the engineering works that they're doing on this street, just to give you a flavour of the different kind of works that we're seeing, or have seen, that are happening around Perth, and the different approaches that different councils have to this. This is the City of Cambridge area, and I've got to say I've got very mixed feelings about how this particular council has done a lot of bike works. They're not as bad as the City of Canada Bay, but they're certainly not as good as some of the other councils, which I think just have a slightly different mindset, I guess, and a different approach to how they do things. And I wonder how many of the the councillors and staff actually ever get on a bike and ride around these areas and just see what this stuff is like for themselves. Disclosure here, my brother actually used to be the mayor of this council until he lost an election. And during his tenure, they were certainly looking at a big improvement in the bike infrastructure, but I don't think he was around long enough. And look, if he was still the mayor, I would be on his back about this kind of stuff in the council area, trust me. And I'd be dragging him out on his bike, probably with the chief executive and an engineer, to actually have a look at this and talk about it. But I don't have that kind of pull anymore, so can't be done. But there's another 10 minutes of this, essentially me just rolling back down to the other end of the road. If you're really interested in engineering and design, you can watch it, and I'll put some music over it to make it a little bit less boring, but I really can't think of a heck of a lot more to say about it. But we're coming into the downhill section of the Concrete Canyon, I guess. So you could get a good speed down here, and I'll be pretty comfortable that I wouldn't be hassled by any drivers coming up behind in this section. But on the other side of the road, it gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it. But look, I do think we need to just go back to this general idea of, it's good to not slow drivers down, but to put a cap on the top speed drivers can do, so they're not doing 132 kilometres an hour through suburbia and killing little kids, and that motorcyclists aren't enabled to go so fast that they lose control and run into a tree and kill themselves as well. And anything that we get as cyclists to slow things down, I guess, are a bonus on that. And if you really want to see a terrible street in the Canada Bay area, I advise you go and have a look at Coranto Street. Sit at the cafe on the corner there for a while having a coffee, and just watch how many patrons from the cafe go and get in their cars and want to show off to their mates, and they go "Roar!" and they go hammering up the street because they've had a couple of affogatos or whatever with their mates, and they're full of caffeine, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna show them how fast my thing can go, and off they go, and you get fancy Italian cars, and you get the motorheads there, and they're souped up Commodores with the blower sticking out of the bonnet and all that kind of stuff. So and it's not just them, it's the young kids and the rice burners. They just see this drag strip and off they go at full bore. These kind of treatments would definitely be of benefit for the residents of those streets, so they don't have to put up with drag strips anymore. What else can I think of? Oh, look, I guess people will probably ask the question, well, why not just narrow the street? And my answer to that is, it's not just a matter of digging up some asphalt and taking a couple of feet off either side of the street to narrow it. You've got to think, okay, if you're going to regrass it, firstly, you've got to take off the asphalt. Then you've got to move the curb. You've got to build out the driveway crossovers as well to the new line of the curb. You've got to dig up all the foundations that were under the road so that grass and trees can grow, because you've got to remember that underneath the tarmac, you've got, I don't know how much, but a certain depth of compacted gravel, etc., which grass and trees and shrubs are going to have trouble growing through. So you want to dig that out. Then you want to put clean fill in so that stuff can grow in it. And then you've got to wonder, well, what's actually under there? Sewer lines, water lines, gas lines, power lines, telephone lines. You've got to worry about that. And if the Sydney Light Rail is any indication of the massive cost blowouts they had because they couldn't find all the services under the road, and they made an absolute mess of things. And then you got to move the drainage. So of course along here there's all the stormwater drains at regular intervals. Well, those drain pits also have to be moved out. Let's say you're taking a metre off, so you got to move them out a metre as well. You know, put in connections to the stormwater system, and then replant it, and just, you know, maybe move the footpaths and maybe move the lights as well. It's a massive, massive undertaking, and it would probably cost 10 to 20 times as much as just digging up a bit of road, slapping down some concrete curbs, putting some clean fill in it, and planting some shrubberies on it. You know, state governments, local governments, federal governments, they don't have unlimited budgets. They can't just go, oh, we're going to spend, you know, $20 million revamping this street to chop a couple of metres off each side and green it. And yes, it would be nice to reduce the amount of asphalt and concrete and put in more grass and trees so that you get less of an urban heat island effect, you get less stormwater runoff when it rains, you get less flooding, you know, all those sorts of issues we get from having over tarmacked suburbia. But the expense of doing so is humongous. And look, maybe at some point in the future when this road needs to be resurfaced because it's all chopped up and horrible, they might go, okay, now's our opportunity. If we're going to completely take the sheet off this street, why don't we not just put as much tarmac back down and narrow things at that point? But yeah, it's lots and lots of cash for doing that kind of thing. So I get just sticking in the blisters. Although I would have thought they'd be sticking in a lot more along here, actually. To me, it seems like there's possibly not enough to slow drivers down. But again, like I said, I'll need to ride this quite a few more times in each direction during the day just to get a feel for what the vehicle traffic's like. How many cars are going up and down? What's the speed like? What's the behaviour of the drivers like? Do they get aggro in that concrete canyon? Blah, blah, blah. Do I spot anyone who's so incompetent that they run into a curb? I mean, that would be a sight to see. In the middle of the day like this, someone drives along and just smacks into one of those curbs. Be like, dude, what is your problem? That'll do. I'm going to put some music on. If you've made it this far, well done. But what you will see at the end here is I'm going to actually ride all the way to a shared path at the very end. And if you get that far, you've done really well.